Did you know that Wyoming is sitting on the world's largest trona deposit, the mineral that powers everything from glass to baking soda to your Coke fizz? Or that hidden in Yellowstone's backcountry is the most remote spot in the lower 48? How about the insane fact that Yellowstone alone has over half of all the geysers on Earth? Well, the Cowboy State has a lot more to it than just empty plains and open skies. So buckle up, because we're about to hit you with 50 of the strangest facts about Wyoming that you probably never knew. Fact 50. World's tallest geyser erupts in Wyoming. Forget Old Faithful, Wyoming hides a geyser that makes it look like a garden sprinkler. Steamboat Geyser is the tallest active geyser on Earth, blasting boiling water 300 plus feet into the sky, about as tall as a 30-story skyscraper. And unlike Old Faithful's clean schedule, Steamboat is pure chaos. It can go silent for years, then erupt out of nowhere for up to 40 minutes straight, drenching the basin in scalding hot spray with a roar you can hear from miles away. It's Yellowstone's most unhinged water show, and proof that nature's real superstar doesn't play by the rules. Fact 49. The day a mountain took off like a rocket. 50 million years ago, Wyoming pulled off the single most insane stunt in Earth's geological history. A mountain slab bigger than Rhode Island suddenly broke loose, 3,500 square kilometers of solid rock, and then slid across the plains at speeds topping 100 miles per hour. How? It literally rode on a cushion of superheated CO2 gas, like a giant stone hovercraft. The aftermath left ancient limestone sitting on top of younger rocks, a geological impossibility that still makes scientists scratch their heads. To this day, no one fully understands how Mother Nature pulled off a landslide that broke the rules of physics. Fact 48. The oceanless desert. In Wyoming's Red Desert, the Continental Divide breaks its own rules. Instead of sending water to the Pacific on one side and the Atlantic on the other, it literally splits in two and creates a 4,000 square mile dead zone called the Great Divide Basin. Any rain that falls here is doomed. It never reaches any ocean. Instead, it collects in ghost lakes that appear and vanish like mirages, or just evaporates into the desert air. Geologists call it an endorheic basin, but the locals describe it better: nature's Hotel California, where water checks in, but it never checks out. Fact 47. A river with an identity crisis. Hidden deep in Wyoming's Teton Wilderness, there's a creek that pulls off one of the rarest tricks in nature. It flows to two different oceans at once. At a spot called Two Ocean Pass, the modest North Two Ocean Creek literally splits in half. One fork journeys east toward the Atlantic, the other west towards the Pacific. That's right, one stream, two oceans. There's no flashy tourist center, no gift shop, just a wooden sign in the forest quietly marking one of the most unique hydrological wonders on Earth. Scientists believe it's the only natural river split in the world that sends water to two separate oceans, protected by treaty because of how insanely rare it is. It's like standing on the world's strangest crossroads, where a single drop of water has to choose which side of the planet it wants to end up on. Fact 46. Wyoming's real tallest peak. And no, it's not the one you think. Here's a twist that'll break a lot of Instagram captions. The famous Grand Teton isn't actually Wyoming's tallest mountain. Even though the Grand, 13,775 feet, gets all the fame, selfies, and postcards, it's secretly outdone by the far more elusive Gannett Peak at 13,810 feet, just 35 feet taller. But here's the kicker. Almost nobody ever climbs it. Why? Because unlike the Grand, you can't just day trip it. To stand on Wyoming's real rooftop, you've got to trek 30 plus miles through brutal wilderness, haul yourself across glaciers, and carry legit mountaineering gear. In fact, Gannett is considered one of the hardest state high points in America to reach. So while the Grand Teton plays the celebrity role, Wyoming's true giant hides in the backcountry, quietly looking down on everything else. Fact 45. Even Wyoming's low is a high. Speaking of Wyoming's towering heights, its lowest point is higher than most states' highest point. The Belfouche River, where it exits the state at about 3,100 feet above sea level, is officially Wyoming's low. But get this, Florida's highest mountain, Britton Hill, is only 345 feet tall. Illinois' top, 1,235 feet. New York's tallest peak, Mount Marcy, 5,344 feet, which means even Wyoming's basement is cruising at more than half of that. In fact, Wyoming's lowest elevation still beats the highest peaks of 17 other states. Let that sink in. Wyoming's worst day still outclimbs nearly a third of America. That's because the entire state sits on a massive high plains plateau, where valleys hang out at mile-high altitudes like it's no big deal. Fact 44, Wyoming's legendary escalator shortage. Here's a fact so ridiculous you'll think it's a joke. The entire state of Wyoming has just 2 working escalators. That's it. Both are tucked inside banks in the city of Casper. There used to be a 3rd escalator in a JCPenney, but it got scrapped when the store moved, leaving Wyoming with fewer escalators than it has US senators. Why? With barely 590,000 people spread across a state bigger than the UK, Wyoming doesn't really do skyscrapers, mega malls, or sprawling airports. Stairs are king. The result is one of America's most legendary trivia stats. Wyomingites literally joke about going on the complete escalator tour, which takes about 10 minutes to ride both of them. Do the math. It works out to 1 escalator per 295,000 people, making Wyoming officially the least escalator-friendly state in the nation. Fact 43. The town with 1 resident that sold for $900,000. Here's one of the strangest real estate deals in American history. In 2012, the entire town of Beaufort, Wyoming, population 1, went up for auction. That's right, a whole town consisting of a gas station, a small house, and a couple of outbuildings along I-80. The bidding wasn't just local curiosity either. It drew buyers from around the world, all desperate to own what was billed as America's smallest town. When the dust settled, a businessman from Vietnam bought the whole thing for $900,000. That means one guy literally sold his own zip code. Fact 42. The town that refused to be fancy. Wyoming almost had a town called Never Sweat, a perfectly rugged frontier name inspired by its warm, dry winds. But in 1889, Washington, D.C. bureaucrats decided that was too improper for polite society and renamed it after an Idaho senator instead, Dubois. Locals, naturally, hated it. But here's where Wyoming's stubborn streak shines. They flat out refused the French Dubois pronunciation and went with Dubois, because, of course, it rhymes with cowboys. Over a century later, tourists who try the French version still get corrected with a smile, proving that frontier spite doesn't just fade, it gets passed down. Fact 41. When antelope outnumber people. Wyoming is one of the few places on Earth where animals could practically outvote humans. The state is home to about 400,000 to 500,000 pronghorn antelope compared to just 590,000 people. In 2006, the speed goat population actually peaked higher than the human head count. And these aren't just any grazers. Pronghorns are North America's fastest land animal, capable of hitting 70 miles per hour and keeping that speed longer than a cheetah. Drive across Wyoming and you'll learn fast. Traffic jams here aren't always caused by cars, but by herds of antelope streaming across the prairie like rush hour on 4 legs. Fact 40. Every county bigger than a state. Wyoming has 23 counties, and every single one dwarfs Rhode Island. Sweetwater County alone spans 10,491 square miles. That's 7 times bigger than Rhode Island, and nearly matches Massachusetts in size. Yet, it's home to only 42,000 people. Wyomingites love to joke that back east, 100 miles feels like a marathon, while in Wyoming, 100 years feels like yesterday. When your neighborhood county is larger than entire states, it definitely shifts your perspective on what counts as just down the road. Fact 39. Wyoming's ancient stone calendar. At nearly 10,000 feet up on Medicine Mountain, Wyoming hides one of North America's greatest mysteries, the Bighorn Medicine Wheel. This ancient stone circle stretches 80 feet across, built centuries ago by indigenous people. It's not just random rocks either. The wheel has 28 spokes and carefully placed piles that align perfectly with the summer solstice sunrise, and even with stars like Sirius and Aldebaran. In other words, it's a prehistoric observatory carved into the alpine tundra. Some archaeologists think parts of it could be even older, hinting that Wyoming's windswept mountaintops were once home to star watchers mapping the heavens long before telescopes ever existed. Fact 38. Wyoming's free hot spring for life. Hidden in the small town of Thermopolis is the world's largest mineral hot spring, a natural fountain gushing out 8,000 gallons of 135 degree Fahrenheit water every minute. It's a geothermal wonder that could rival a luxury spa. Except here, you don't pay a cent. Why? Because back in 1896, when the Shoshone and Arapaho tribes gave up this sacred land, they had one demand. These waters must remain free to the public forever. Over a century later, the promise still stands. You can walk into the Thermopolis State Bathhouse and soak in steaming, mineral-rich waters without opening your wallet, all thanks to a treaty clause that turned Wyoming into the world's most affordable day spa. Fact 37. The mineral that powers your entire life. Buried beneath Wyoming's sagebrush desert is a treasure most people have never even heard of. The world's largest trona deposit. The Green River Basin holds an estimated 127 billion tons of this plain-looking crystal, and it quietly powers almost everything in your daily life. Wyoming's mines supply about 90% of all US soda ash, the key ingredient in glass, baking soda, detergent, even your soda fizz. Every time you look through a window, wash dishes, or crack open a Coke, there's a good chance Wyoming's ancient geology made it possible. Tourists may think they're just driving across an empty desert, but in reality, they're passing over one of the most economically important mineral fields on Earth. Fact 36. Devil's Tower's name is a 147-year-old mistake. Rising 867 feet straight out of the prairie, Devil's Tower is one of the most recognizable geological landmarks in America. So striking, it even starred in Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. But here's the wild part. It should have never been called Devil's anything. Local indigenous nations, including the Lakota and Cheyenne, have always known it as Bear Lodge, a sacred place tied to spiritual bear stories. The spooky name was born in 1875 when a U.S. Army interpreter mistranslated it as Bad God's Tower, and officials doubled down by officially naming it Devil's Tower. When President Teddy Roosevelt declared it America's first national monument in 1906, the mistranslation was locked into law. To this day, Native nations are still petitioning to restore the original Bear Lodge name, proof that even America's most iconic landmarks can carry centuries-old mistakes carved in stone. Fact 35. Stranded on Devil's Tower. Devil's Tower isn't just famous for its alien movie cameo or naming drama. It's also the site of one of the most ridiculous stunts in U.S. history. In 1941, daredevil parachutist George Hopkins made a $50 bet that he could land on the flat summit of the 867-foot monolith. Good news, he nailed the landing. Bad news, there was no way down. For the next 6 days, Hopkins was literally stranded on top of Wyoming's most iconic rock while the entire country watched. Newspapers dubbed him the Man on the Tower as planes dropped food, blankets, and even beer to keep him alive. Tourists flocked to the base, staring like it was a live-action reality show. Finally, the US Army had to stage a rope rescue to get him off his stone prison. It started as a bar bet. It ended as one of the wildest rescue stories of the 20th century. Proof that Devil's Tower doesn't just attract climbers and legends, but also the occasional headline-chasing gambler with no exit plan. Fact 34. Most remote spot in the lower 48. Tucked away in the far southeastern corner of Yellowstone lies a place so isolated it feels like it belongs to another century, the Thoroughfare region. Officially the most remote spot in the contiguous United States. From here, you're about 20 miles from the nearest road in every direction, meaning if you hiked all day, you still wouldn't touch civilization. Reaching it isn't a casual stroll. It takes nearly a week of serious backpacking through brutal grizzly bear country. And out here, bears really do outnumber people. Forget cell service, Wi-Fi, or even the faint glow of a town in the distance. The thoroughfare has no roads, no buildings, no escape routes. Just endless alpine meadows, rivers, and mountains stretching to every horizon. For hardcore adventurers, this is the ultimate bragging rights wilderness. The one place left in the lower 48 where you can still experience true, bone-deep isolation. The kind our ancestors knew, but almost no one today ever will. Fact 33. University at 7,220 feet. The University of Wyoming in Laramie sits at a lung-busting 7,220 feet above sea level, one of the highest state college campuses on Earth and the highest in the US. Their War Memorial Stadium claims the title of loftiest NCAA Division I football field, where visiting teams get an unwelcome lesson in oxygen deprivation right at kickoff. Students love joking that the home of the Cowboys is literally closer to heaven. and Laramie earned the nickname Gem City of the Plains for its crystal clear, thin mountain air. Talk about getting high on education. Fact 32. The only real Archaeopteryx outside Europe, tucked away in the tiny town of Thermopolis, Wyoming, hides a fossil so rare it makes diamonds look common. Inside the Wyoming Dinosaur Center sits a genuine Archaeopteryx, the legendary 150 million year old first bird that marks one of evolution's biggest turning points, the moment dinosaurs took flight. Here's why this is so absurd. Only about a dozen Archaeopteryx fossils have ever been discovered on Earth, and nearly every single one is locked away in German museums under glass. But Wyoming somehow scored the only authentic Archaeopteryx on display outside of Europe. That means if you want to see this half-dinosaur, half-bird missing link in person, the creature that literally bridges the gap between T-Rex and modern pigeons, you don't go to Berlin or Munich. You head to a small town in the American West, in Thermopolis, of all places. Fact 31. The biggest coal mine on the planet. Inside Wyoming's Powder River Basin is the North Antelope Rochelle Mine, the single most productive coal mine on Earth. At peak output, this site shipped over 100 million tons of coal in a single year, more than the entire coal production of some nations. The numbers are outrageous. The mine sprawls across 10 square miles, and its pits are so huge they're visible from space. The trucks that haul the rock are each the size of a small house, weighing 300 tons apiece. Yet, they look like toy cars against the backdrop of the mine. This one operation alone has powered US electrical grids from coast to coast, turning an otherwise empty stretch of prairie into the beating heart of America's energy economy. Fact 30. A natural bridge with a creek underneath. Hidden near Douglas, Wyoming stands the Ayers National Bridge, a 30-foot high, 50-foot wide limestone arch so rare it's practically a geological unicorn. Why? Because it's just one of 3 natural bridges in the entire US that still carries a live creek flowing underneath. This isn't just a pretty formation, it's a masterpiece carved by Leparle Creek itself, patiently tunneling through solid rock over countless millennia until it created its own perfect stone gateway. Oregon Trail pioneers once wrote about stumbling across this oasis, calling it one of the most beautiful spots in the West. But not all stories were so happy. Native legends warned of evil spirits lurking beneath the waters, adding a ghostly twist to one of America's most breathtaking hidden landmarks. Fact 29. Highway to Heaven, or Blowover Alley. If you thought Wyoming was all quiet prairies, think again. Its highways double as one of the most dangerous wind tunnels in America. Along I-80 near Arlington, gusts routinely slam the road at 70 to 80 miles per hour. Literally, hurricane-force winds ripping across the plains. And these winds don't just nudge cars around. In January 2025, an 88-mile-per-hour gust ripped through and actually flipped multiple semi-trucks, tossing 80,000-pound rigs across the asphalt like they were toy cars. It happens so often that the Wyoming Department of Transportation now posts daily extreme blowover risk warnings, and entire sections of I-25 and I-80 regularly shut down when the notorious Chinook winds decide to flex. In Wyoming, the danger on the highway isn't traffic, it's the atmosphere itself trying to knock you over. Fact 28. Wyoming's cold could rival Mars. Wyoming doesn't just do winter, it does Arctic apocalypse. In February 1933, the state hit an absurd negative 66 degrees Fahrenheit, negative 54 degrees Celsius at Riverside Ranger Station, one of the coldest temperatures ever recorded in the continental US. How cold is that? Nearly as bitter as a Martian night, colder than Antarctica in summer, and just a few degrees shy of the US record. At that level, saliva freezes before it hits the ground, and skin feels like it's being stabbed with 1,000 ice needles. Forget chilly. Wyoming cold is straight up lethal. Fact 27. First national park and first national monument. In 1872, Yellowstone became not only America's first national park, but the first national park on Earth. The idea was so radical that other countries didn't even have a word for it yet. 3 decades later, Teddy Roosevelt doubled down by, as we mentioned, declaring Wyoming's Devil's Tower as the very first U.S. national monument in 1906. That move created an entirely new category of protection, ensuring that unique landmarks would be preserved forever. Together, these two firsts ignited a global conservation movement, inspiring everything from Canada's national parks to Africa's game reserves. In other words, the world's idea of saving nature started right here. Fact 26. Yellowstone, larger than 2 states. Just when you think you understand Wyoming's sense of scale, Yellowstone National Park comes along to completely blow your mind. This mostly Wyoming wonderland sprawls across a massive 3,472 square miles. That's legitimately bigger than Rhode Island and Delaware combined, with room left over for a decent-sized city. And here's the real kicker. This massive park represents just one entry in Wyoming's impressive portfolio of huge protected lands. It's like the state looked at the concept of big and said, watch this. Fact 25. Wyoming's one and only area code. While big cities juggle half a dozen area codes, Wyoming keeps things simple. The entire state runs on just one, 307. From Cheyenne to Cody, every single phone number starts with those same 3 digits. And here's the kicker. With only about 590,000 people spread across all that wide open space, Wyoming has never even come close to running out of numbers. That scarcity turned into pride. 307 has become a cultural badge you'll see slapped on ranch gates, bar signs, car decals, and t-shirts. In fact, locals treat it like a symbol of identity. Fact 24. The sinking river of Sinks Canyon. Near Lander, Wyoming, the middle fork of the Popoza River performs one of nature's most mind-bending performances. It vanishes into a cave called the Sinks, disappears completely underground, then mysteriously reappears about a quarter-mile downstream at a spot aptly named The Rise. But here's where it gets really weird. It takes the water roughly 2 hours to make the short underground journey, which should be a quick hop by river standards. Even stranger, when the water finally gushes back to the surface, there's actually more water flowing out than went in. The river picks up extra flow from hidden springs and limestone cracks deep in its underground maze, essentially growing bigger while traveling through solid rock. Fact 23. Icebox of the nation. Forget Minnesota's trademark. The tiny town of Big Piney, Wyoming has a case for being America's true deep freeze. With an average annual temperature of just 36 degrees Fahrenheit, it regularly ranks as the coldest spot in the lower 48. And this isn't just about brutal winters, though it has hit a face-numbing negative 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Big Piney stays cold year-round. Even July nights can drop below freezing. Locals embrace it with dark humor, joking they get 9 months of winter and 3 months of poor sledding. In short, Wyoming's so-called icebox is so relentlessly chilly, even summer can feel like winter. Fact 22. Jade Fields of Wyoming. Move over, gold rushes. Wyoming had a jade rush that was way cooler. The state's official gemstone is nephrite jade, and this apple green beauty is considered among the finest on the planet. In the 1940s to 60s, rockhounds swarmed central Wyoming's granite mountains, hauling out jade boulders so massive that single pieces weighed over a ton. Good luck fitting that into a rock tumbler. These days, the easy pickings are long gone, but tailings from old mining operations and local gift shops still offer up pieces of that signature deep green see-through jade that put Wyoming on the Gemstone map. Fact 21. The Supervolcano hiding under Yellowstone. Beneath Yellowstone's postcard geysers and rainbow hot springs lies something far more terrifying. A volcanic crater so massive it covers 45 miles by 30 miles. This isn't just a regular volcano. It's one of Earth's few true supervolcanoes. The last time it erupted, about 640,000 years ago, the blast threw out 240 cubic miles of ash and rock. That's enough to bury the state of Texas under 5 feet of debris, or darken skies across entire continents. It was an explosion thousands of times bigger than Mount St. Helens. Today, scientists keep constant watch on Yellowstone's magma system. The good news? There's no sign it's about to blow. If it ever did, the warnings would come well in advance. Until then, it sits quietly, powering the boiling pools and geysers that attract millions of visitors each year. Fact 20. Singing sand dunes in the Cowboy State. Wyoming's Kilpecker sand dunes stretch across 109,000 acres of pure otherworldliness. One of North America's largest active dune fields where the sand literally sings. When the wind shoves billions of grains across the surface, the dunes boom, hum, and sing with an eerie low-frequency roar that vibrates through the air. like the desert itself is alive. Scientists call them booming dunes, but locals just know the sound gives you goosebumps. And it isn't just sand. Rising from this alien landscape is Boar's Tusk, a jagged 400-foot volcanic spire, the last remnant of an ancient volcano that once towered over the plains. Add in migrating living dunes that creep across the desert floor like slow-motion waves, and you've got one of the most surreal places on the planet. A natural concert hall where the earth plays its own soundtrack. Fact 19. Wyoming pulled off the public lands hat trick. Wyoming doesn't just dabble in conservation. It invented the playbook. The state can brag about being the birthplace of America's first national park, its first national monument, and its first national forest. As we mentioned, it started in 1872 when Yellowstone became the world's first national park, kicking off a movement that didn't even have a name yet. Then, in 1906, President Teddy Roosevelt declared Devil's Tower the first national monument, setting another historic precedent. But here's the part most people don't know. In 1891, before the monument, the Yellowstone Park Timberland Reserve was established. Today, we call it Shoshone National Forest. And at 2.4 million acres of untamed wilderness, it proudly holds the title of the very first national forest in the United States. Put it all together, and Wyoming pulled off the ultimate conservation hat trick: park, monument, and forest, making it the undisputed godfather of America's public lands. Fact 18. Ernest Hemingway's Wyoming love affair. When most people picture Ernest Hemingway, they imagine Paris cafes, Spanish bullfights, or Cuban fishing boats. But here's the curveball. The legendary author once declared Wyoming his last good country. After visiting Sheridan in 1928, Hemingway became hooked on the Cowboy State. He finished A Farewell to Arms in the Bighorn Mountains and returned again and again for fishing trips, hunting expeditions, and weeks-long escapes from fame. To Hemingway, Wyoming was a creative sanctuary. He kept a rustic cabin tucked away in the Bighorns, where he could vanish from the spotlight and re-emerge with new pages of his next masterpiece. Fact 17. North America's oldest dinosaur named in Shoshone. In 2025, scientists announced the discovery of North America's oldest dinosaur in Wyoming, a chicken-sized creature named Avetum bonduavice in the Eastern Shoshone language, meaning long ago bird. This 230 million-year-old fossil rewrites dinosaur history and breaks scientific tradition by honoring Wyoming's indigenous people and its name. The feathered, beaked dinosaur lived during the Triassic period and represents a groundbreaking discovery that's changing our understanding of early dinosaur evolution. Fact 16. World's largest dinosaur track site in Red Gulch. Wyoming's Red Gulch Dinosaur Track Site is the largest in the state and one of only a few worldwide from the Middle Jurassic period, 160 to 180 million years old. Scientists believe the tracks were made by two-legged dinosaurs walking along an ancient shoreline, perhaps hunting for meals left by high tides. You can literally walk in 175 million-year-old dinosaur footsteps preserved in sandstone, hundreds of them scattered across the desert floor like an ancient dance floor where giants once roamed. Fact 15. State Dino. Wyoming is crazy about dinosaurs. The proof? It is one of only a few states to have an official state dino. In 1994, Wyoming elementary school kids got to vote for their state dinosaur, and they chose the mighty Triceratops, the three-horned, tank-like herbivore that roamed the state over 65 million years ago. Only about 8 to 10 states have official state dinosaurs versus state fossils, making Wyoming part of an exclusive dino-loving club. With its massive shield-like frill and iconic horns, Triceratops perfectly represents Wyoming's tough, no-nonsense attitude. It's basically the cowboy of dinosaurs. Fact 14. Wyoming's Three Flag Past. Here's a twist most people don't realize. Nearly 10% of Wyoming used to belong to Mexico. Before the US carved it up into straight-line borders, a big slice of southwest Wyoming was first Spanish territory, then Mexican land, until the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848 flipped the map and handed it to the US. But that's only part of the story. In Sweetwater County, you can actually stand at the Tri-Territory Historic Site, where 4 flagpoles mark the spot where the Louisiana Purchase, the Oregon Territory, and the Mexican Cession once collided. It's a windswept, lonely monument. No towns, no tourist traps, just the echoes of empires that once fought over the American West. The wildest part? All this boundary drama unfolded long before Wyoming even existed as a state, meaning that in one dusty corner of modern Wyoming, you can literally stand where three nations' ambitions smash together on the frontier. Fact 13. Wyoming's straight lines. Alongside Utah and Colorado, Wyoming is one of only 3 states that uses only straight lines for borders. Wyoming, Utah, and Colorado are the exclusive trio of states whose borders are entirely made up of straight lines. No rivers, mountains, or colonial-era zigzags to complicate things. While most states got their shapes from natural features or historical accidents, these 3 were carved up by surveyors with rulers and compasses during westward expansion. Utah would have been a perfect rectangle if Wyoming hadn't bitten a chunk out of its northeastern corner. Fact 12. Wyoming pioneered the dude ranch experience. The first dude ranch in Wyoming was the Eaton Ranch near Wolf, established in 1879 by Howard Willis and Alden Eaton, 3 brothers from Pittsburgh who started something entirely new. Originally located in North Dakota, they moved to Wolf, Wyoming in 1904 to offer better mountain scenery and riding terrain for their growing number of eastern guests. Here's the cool part. The Eatons didn't just create the first dude ranch. They're credited with coining the term dude for city slickers seeking authentic western experiences. Today, Eaton's Ranch is still family-run and has been named America's #1 dude ranch, making Wyoming the birthplace of an entire tourism industry that turned cowboy culture into vacation gold. Fact 11. Federal land. Believe it or not, the federal government owns just under half of Wyoming's land. At 48.2% federally owned, that's over 30 million acres of Wyoming under Uncle Sam's control, including national parks, forests, and BLM lands. Before you start grumbling about government overreach, mind you, this isn't such a bad deal compared to Nevada. But you'll need to watch our Nevada video to find out just how much of that silver state belongs to Washington, D.C. Fact 10. Wyoming's license plate horse was real. That bucking horse on every Wyoming license plate, it was a real animal. Meet Steamboat, a 1,100-pound black bronc from the early 1900s that locals swore was part tornado, part horse. Steamboat got his name after breaking his nose, which left a permanent whistle in his breathing that sounded like a steam engine. In the rodeo arena, that whistle only got louder as he launched cowboys sky high. From 1900 to 1908, he reigned as the state's most feared and legendary bucker, earning the title, the horse that couldn't be ridden. When artist Alan True designed the state's bucking horse logo in 1936, he immortalized Steamboat's silhouette, turning a flesh and blood bronco into the eternal symbol of frontier grit. So every time you spot a Wyoming plate on the highway, you're looking at a real 4-legged athlete who stomped his way into Wild West history. Fact 9. Second highest capital. At 6,063 feet, 1,848 meters, Cheyenne is the second highest capital in the U.S. Only Santa Fe in New Mexico is higher. Santa Fe sits at a lofty 7,199 feet above sea level, making it the highest state capital in America, even higher than the famous mile-high city of Denver. At over a mile above sea level, Cheyenne's elevation means visitors from lower altitudes might feel a bit winded during their first few days exploring Wyoming's capital. The thin air also makes everything from baking cookies to boiling water different. A quirky reminder that you're literally closer to the sky in the equality state. Fact 8. Only 2 tribes remain. Wyoming may be one of America's largest states by land, but today it's home to only 2 federally recognized native tribes, the Eastern Shoshone and the Northern Arapaho. It wasn't always this way. The plains of Wyoming once supported a patchwork of nations: Arikara, Bannock, Blackfeet, Cheyenne, Crow, Kiowa, Nez Perce, Sioux, Ute, and more. By the late 1800s, nearly all had been displaced through wars, broken treaties, and forced removals. In 1878, about 950 Northern Arapaho, who had lost their homelands, were escorted by the U.S. Army onto the Eastern Shoshone's reservation at Wind River. Here's the twist. Just 4 years earlier, the Shoshone and Arapaho had been in open conflict. Now, they were forced to coexist on the same land. A situation fraught with tension, resilience, and eventual adaptation. The Wind River Reservation remains today, symbolizing both survival and loss. From more than a dozen tribal nations once calling Wyoming home, only 2 remain recognized, carrying the weight of a history that reshaped the entire region. Fact 7. A flag of heritage and sacrifice. Wyoming state flag features a bold white bison silhouette against a blue field, with the state seal branded onto the buffalo as a nod to Wyoming's ranching tradition. The deep blue represents fidelity, justice, and virility, while the red border honors both Native Americans who knew this land first and the pioneers who shed blood settling it. Originally designed by Verna Keyes in 1916, the bison faced away from the flagpole to symbolize the freedom these creatures once enjoyed roaming Wyoming's plains. Every element celebrates Wyoming's Wild West heritage, from branding cattle to honoring those who shaped the frontier. Fact 6. Wyoming's bizarre rabbit law. Only in Wyoming could taking a photo of a bunny land you in hot water. Believe it or not, state law once required an official permit to photograph rabbits between January and April. Yes, really. On the surface, it sounds like something out of a comedy sketch, but the logic was dead serious. Those months are rabbit breeding season, and officials wanted to stop photographers, especially commercial ones, from disturbing wildlife during that critical time. But here's where it gets hilariously absurd. The wording technically made it illegal to snap a quick Easter bunny pic without paperwork. That's right, in Wyoming, you could photograph a moose without a problem, but a rabbit in March? Better have your permit ready. It's a perfect example of how government overcorrection can turn into legendary trivia. A law so oddly specific it became one of the strangest wildlife rules in American history. Fact 5. Wyoming's confusing river. Most rivers know who they are, but in Wyoming, one literally can't decide. Just south of Thermopolis, the Wind River is flowing along just fine until it suddenly changes its name midstream to become the Bighorn River at a spot known as the Wetting of the Waters. Here's the kicker. This isn't two rivers joining forces like the name suggests. It's the exact same river with a full-on identity crisis. Early explorers were so confused by the mountains blocking their view that they assumed they were dealing with two different rivers. The result? Maps, signs, and legends all wrapped around this quirky rename. Some credit a Jesuit missionary, Father de Smet, for giving it the poetic name, though there's no solid proof. Today, the Wetting is less about romance and more about trivia gold, one of the only places on Earth where a river just decides to reinvent itself halfway through its journey. Fact 4. Yellowstone's geysers, half of Earth's total. Here's a mind-blowing stat for you. Wyoming is home to over half of all the geysers on planet Earth. Containing more than 10,000 geothermal features, Yellowstone National Park also has bragging rights to the fact that it showcases 500 plus geysers out of roughly 1,000 known worldwide. Nowhere else even comes close. When you're wandering through Yellowstone's geyser basins, you're literally witnessing a majority of the planet's geyser activity in one spot. All of that bubbling, spouting, and hissing is courtesy of the massive magma chamber lurking below. A volcanic showcase so unique it draws scientists and tourists from every corner of the globe. Fact 3. Wyoming's Mystery Pyramid. The Ames Monument is a 60-foot high granite pyramid that rises from Wyoming's windswept plains at 8,247 feet above sea level, the highest point on the original Union Pacific Railroad. Designed by famous architect Henry Hobson Richardson and completed in 1882 at a cost of $64,000, millions today, this structure was built to honor railroad barons Oakes and Oliver Ames. But there's a twist here. The railroad later moved the tracks away from the monument, leaving this massive pyramid literally high and dry on the empty prairie. It's like Wyoming's version of the Egyptian pyramids, only built to celebrate America's Gilded Age railroad empire. Today, this lonely monument stands as a testament to both ambition and the fleeting nature of corporate glory. Fact 2. Epic Snow Chi Min Trail. Interstate 80 through southern Wyoming is so legendarily brutal that truckers nicknamed it the Snow Chi Min Trail. The stretch between Laramie and Rawlins over Elk Mountain is especially vicious. High winds whip up ground blizzards that appear out of absolutely nowhere. Ironically, I-80 follows the old Union Pacific Railroad route because it was the flattest path through the Rockies. But that also makes it a sitting duck for Wyoming's fiercest weather. Winter closures are routine, turning highway hotels into impromptu refugee camps where stranded travelers swap war stories. Remember when I-80 shut down and we were stuck in Rawlins for 3 days? It's all part of Wyoming's winter charm. Fact 1. Stinking River and other odd place names. Wyoming has a serious talent for memorable place names that sound like they came straight from a frontier tall tale. There's Stinking Water River, thanks to sulfur-scented geothermal springs, Burnt Wagon Gulch, commemorating some poor pioneer's very bad day, and Crazy Woman Creek, tied to a grim folktale about an upset frontierswoman. Then there's tiny Chugwater, supposedly named after a native legend involving poisoned streams and bison hunting. With relatively few towns scattered across this huge state, the ones that made it onto the map often wear their stories right on the road signs. In Wyoming, history and myth literally seep into the geography. What about 50 wild facts about Colorado that sound fake, but aren't?